Welcome to our Pro Bono Service webinar. My name is Jenny Jung, and I am the Senior Associate of the Evaluation and Data Insights team at CECP. I lead the development of and outreach efforts of the Giving in Numbers survey, and I welcome all of you today. I'd also like to introduce my co-presenter, Lindsay.
Hi everyone, Lindsay Firestone-Gruber here from the Taproot Foundation, overseeing our advisory services practice. I'm happy to be with you today.
Great. And in our room, we also have Carmen Perez, who is the Director of Evaluation and Data Insights team at CECP, joining us as well.
Thanks for dialing in, everyone.
As I mentioned, today's webinar is titled Pro Bono Service, What is it? And we'll also be talking about how to increase your company's non-cash giving, as well as some additional exciting updates and news for you and your team. Just as an overview, for today's webinar, you can expect a 30-minute presentation, followed by a 15-minute section devoted to answering your questions and providing answers. Just a note that you can submit your questions anytime in your toolbox or text box that will be visible on your screen. And great news is that the recording will be available next week for you to review and also to share with others. Now, the bulk of the session today is all about pro bono service and answering your questions such as what is it and how do you measure it, and also why is this so important. And as I mentioned, leaving at the end of the session to answer your questions. So we'd like to begin our session today with a poll. And if you, for all of those who are here joining us with the web, if you can go ahead and select an answer here. Does your company have a pro bono service program? And you'll see the answer choices. There are 4. Yes, active for many years. B, yes, recently started, perhaps less than 2 years ago. C, no, but you are exploring it. And D, either you're unsure or you do not see it happening in the foreseeable future. So I see the votes coming in. And Lindsay, can you also see the results as well?
No, I just see the exciting poll questions themselves, so interested to see.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to wait a couple more seconds. It looks like 75% of our attendees have voted. I'm just trying to wait a little bit longer. Let's see. All right, and here we will close the survey. It looks like 33% of those in the audience chose answer D, unsure or no, not in the foreseeable future. Okay. Oh, and I've been told that now the answer choices are visible on your screen. So 33% said unsure, not in the foreseeable future, followed by 28% saying not yet, but exploring, followed by 22% saying yes, recently started, and then 17% of you said yes, active for many years. Lindsay, I think this is great because we know that we have a webinar focused on talking about what it is, what pro bono service is, why it is important, how it is relevant to companies joining today. So can you go ahead and get us started with what Taproot Foundation defines pro bono service and pro bono programs as?
Yes, absolutely, and agreed. This I think ends up being the perfect mix of content for the variety of people we have on the call. We'll be really thoughtful about giving you a little more of a clear picture of what exactly this thing is that we call pro bono service, and some really important key questions and examples to get you thinking about what it could look like for you, or for those of you that already have it, what it might mean to grow. So many of you might have had the chance to see this diagram before. It's Taproot's corporate community engagement spectrum. And over the years, we found it to be the most helpful and kind of commonly used resource we have for companies to really understand the context of how this thing that we call pro bono service really fits into the overall spectrum, not just of skills-based volunteering, but of the total array of ways that companies help nonprofit organizations meet the needs they have. So one thing I would like to say, and I think we have a few lawyers on the line as well, so you'll see this pop up. Oh, and Jenny, it looks like I can't advance. I'll have you click. There we go. Thank you. Pro bono itself, yeah, perfect, thank you. It's Latin for the public good, but I also like to say it doesn't translate to free legal work because most people really do just associate pro bono with pro bono legal services. And there are so many other types of professional services that nonprofits very much need and that your employees also have the skill and ability to provide. So it's really about providing professional services of any of those relevant varieties that are donated to help these organizations serving social good. It's a large growing thing. So for many of you, you've been hearing about it for a few years. For others, you're probably just beginning to hear it talked about quite a bit more. That's because, as CECP will share with you a little later on, it's also one of the fastest growing categories of CSR programming. And it's estimated that each year about $15 billion worth of pro bono services are donated to organizations of this variety. And when you think about it in the context of the more traditional financial donations, that's 4x, so it's pretty significant. So the main thing I'll emphasize here before we have the chance to dig into it a little more deeply in some future slides is that pro bono is really about professional expertise. So of all the arrays of the types of skills of your employees that you can leverage, here's where we're really referring to the types that focus on helping the organization itself improve its infrastructure and leadership and its ability to do the work. Now, from the company perspective, when you think about why you would explore pro bono, why you would potentially want to bring a program like this to life, there are so many reasons, but we find there are really 4 buckets that really tend to resonate the most. The first you see here is around increasing your community impact. So first, I want to start with what means the most to us, of course, which is the impact on the beneficiary nonprofit organizations themselves. From a need perspective, more than 92% of nonprofits surveyed indicate that they need and want more pro bono service. Yet only 8% report actually having sufficient access to pro bono services. And as so many of you know from working with nonprofits in many other forums in the past, nonprofits are also greatly limited in the amount of their budget and resources that they can spend investing in their own organization's infrastructure and leadership. On average, it's reported around 8.7% compared to the average in the private sector of 20 to 25%. So some significant need there for these organizations to make the investments they need to have their organizations be able to move their programs forward, operate efficiently, and really deliver on the missions that you really care about helping them fulfill. So in addition, from the company's perspective, you have a way to increase your community impact by not only adding this additional avenue of service, but also by helping those same organizations become even stronger as entities in order to bring their critical programming to life. Internally, from a business standpoint, there's tremendous HR benefit, and many of you have seen a lot of the recent articles in the last 2 years highlighting just how much pro bono service activities are now becoming a part of different corporate talent development and learning development activities. And in particular, there's an area around recruitment and retention where we're seeing tremendous benefit. One example being a recent survey of HP employees that indicated that employees that participate in pro bono service above and beyond traditional volunteering have 38% higher levels of morale than those who do not participate. And 91% of HR professionals believe that this type of volunteering can be an effective way to develop leadership skills. So real return there. And then lastly, reputation and innovation. So really being able to be thoughtful about demonstrating to the community externally the value of the talent that you have and the expertise you bring to the table. And then on the reverse side, being able to have your employees really bring back their insights in needing to work in an unusual setting and applying their skills in a different forum. So a lot of compelling reasons there how you can make the business case to think about pro bono service within your own company.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. And as everyone in the audience can tell, Lindsay herself, as well as the Taproot Foundation, represent their expertise and their work in championing pro bono service. And with CCP, what we've done is that we've taken all of the great groundwork that their team has done and have catered it and ensure that the messaging is also targeted towards the corporate community as well. So in that vein, CCP has very specific ideas and definitions on what pro bono service is. Pro bono service, to begin with, is the fastest growing employee volunteering program, with the percentage of companies offering it actually having increased from 40% in 2012 to 51% in 2014. So more than half of companies in our most recent data set. In terms of corporate giving and philanthropy, pro bono is a type of non-cash giving because there's a monetary value to it, and both Lindsay and I will be going into detail in a couple of minutes. It is a form of skills-based volunteering, but pro bono service is distinct because it must meet 3 criteria. First, there must be a formal commitment, meaning your company must make a formal commitment to the recipient organization for the final work product. It means that your company is responsible for the entire scope, so beginning with granting the service, staffing the project, ensuring its timely completion, and overall quality. Stated in another way, your company must apply the highest professional standards to the pro bono engagement, just like your company would do with a paying client. And I should note that projects that occur informally as a result of an employee's personal interest and his or her individual availability would not be included as a form of non-cash giving, but more on that in a little bit. And then the third criteria is that the employee performing the professional function must be related to the core function and use the same skills that constitute the core of their official job descriptions. So projects that draw only upon some of an employee's basic job knowledge would not be considered pro bono service. The third criteria is that it must be in the form of indirect services and made to an end recipient that is formally organized, has a charitable purpose, and never distributes profits. So what this is saying is that the service must be provided to an organization, and most 501c3 organizations or the international equivalent are actually included in this. I should also note that this criteria, and this specific criterion, is based on the Global Guide Standard, and it holds for all types of giving recorded in the Giving in Numbers survey. And I did do a webinar 2 weeks ago on this topic, so happy to forward that information to you separately. And I'll provide also specific examples that kind of go into detail of these 3 criteria. And just a reminder that everyone should be aware you can reach out to anyone on either the CCP team for specific guidance on reporting it as a non-cash giving or reporting it in our annual survey, as well as reporting out to, as well as connecting with the experts on the Taproot Foundation for understanding how to leverage those services and engaging your employees. So, moving on to the next question, which I think many of you are probably asking, where on the annual Giving in Numbers survey will I see this question? As some of you may know, the survey has 6 major components, each with 1 mandatory question. So section 1 is about the company, where we ask for basic information such as your company's address and location. Section 2 is where we ask about your company's total contributions. Section 3 about international giving. Section 4 on employee engagement. Section 5 is on foundation structure and the administrative aspect, and Section 6 on evaluating and measuring the impact of your grantees and grants. There will be 2 sections in which pro bono service can be reported in the survey. There is on Section 2, question 2A, we actually have a question that says to please provide the breakdown of non-cash giving. The second area in which you might be able to report pro bono service is in Section 4. And there are actually 3 different sections here where questions 4C asks, do you offer it? It's a simple yes or no question. Question 4D asks, is it one of your top 3 most successful programs in engaging your employees? And then question 4F asks for the total number of hours. I should note that we know that not all companies have this information available and that maybe companies do not yet track it. But the good news is not to worry, because we know that measuring, tracking, reporting is a multi-year process, and that CCP is here as a resource to support you in those aspects, especially when it comes to participating and responding and reporting in our annual survey. So now, just like with Taproot, you may be asking, why pro bono? And I wanted to share a finding from our latest Giving in Numbers, the 2015 edition. We know that the number of companies reporting that they offer pro bono programs has continuously increased, and then Lindsay had also mentioned this earlier, talking about the variety and the diversity in which we see companies engaging pro bono service. And we know that it is no longer for lawyers, accountants, and financiers. So in the green bar graph up on top, you can see that 50% of companies in our latest Giving in Numbers data set reported offering pro bono programs. And right underneath it is the healthcare companies, and then even beneath that, technology companies who are showing the strongest offerings of pro bono opportunities, with 70% and 59% of companies offering it to their employees. Now, this is another chart similar to what Lindsay had shown, and we've just changed some of the formatting, but it is the same information that you saw a couple of slides ago, where back in 2009, CCP, in partnership with the Taproot Foundation, developed a pro bono valuation guide. And this is where you see the range of engagement and volunteering programs. On the top, you'll see that it says employee engagement, and right underneath it, the darker yellow and the orange is broken down into traditional volunteering and skills-based volunteering. And then in the blue is where pro bono service would lie, which again, we've been talking about it as a non-cash equivalent. Lindsay, did you want to give examples of what would be considered pro bono service under both the Taproot and CCP valuation guidance?
Yes, absolutely. So you see a few examples written up here, but just to help bring them to life a little bit, you can think, just like Ginny was saying, in really specific related terms to the exact types of projects and initiatives that your internal experts work on every day for your company, and how those would then apply directly to a nonprofit organization. So a few examples you see here on collateral design, being able to have some of your folks that focus on graphic design, on communications material development, where that's a core part of their job. Being able to design collateral then for a nonprofit organization can be such a direct translation of their skill and provides tremendous value for organizations that frankly couldn't otherwise invest that kind of cash budget against engaging designers. HR consulting is another very common category with tremendous need for nonprofits and often very little access to that profession. And some examples of projects we often see in this space are having some HR experts from within a company help an organization develop a succession plan, help them do an audit of their existing HR processes and materials in order to identify key improvements, helping to develop a 360 review process or performance measurement system, other types of, again, very kind of direct translation projects like that. And then IT assistants, another very common popular one, having people from that specific tech focus within a company help an organization think about and assess what their overall IT strategy should be, where they might need to invest in some specific improvements in the ways they're engaging their databases, et cetera. So many more examples from there, but just a few to get people started thinking about what that kind of work can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. And some of the other, and we just got a question asking what would be examples of this orange here, the skills-based volunteering, but not pro bono, according to the CCP valuation. You'll see over here under board service, you'll see two sub-bullets that say board placement and board member training. The reason why something like that would be considered skills-based volunteering and not pro bono service is that it would not meet one of the three criteria that we mentioned, where the role and the service being offered by the employee, it must meet the core function of his or her job. So if a corporate executive is serving on a nonprofit board and is giving informal advice, it's being placed in a specific board, The act of those would certainly be volunteerism and engaging employees, but because it is not using, say, the HR-specific skills of a HR executive, therefore that would not be considered pro bono service. Another example could be that an individual of a company is offering his or her commitment to volunteer with a community organization, or a software designer is setting up staff computers, but that wouldn't be the core job description of that specific individual at his or her workplace. So there are those special nuances, and we appreciate the question. Okay, so with that, I'd love to go into the steps and the different methods for actually tracking pro bono now that we understand what pro bono service is. There are 3 scenarios, beginning with the level that we would consider to be the most robust, where the best way to track pro bono would be using fair market value, so FMV, and recording it as non-cash giving. FMV is the hourly or project cost that a paying client would incur for that same service. And companies are actually encouraged to consult all of the 3 scenarios that we will be sharing and seeing what works best for your team. But also noting that FMV of the services that are being offered could vary depending on your geographic location, as well as the type of service being done by the career level of the employee. And so with that, CCP, whenever possible, encourages companies to track pro bono using the fair market value. And Lindsay, can you tell us about the second scenario that we also recommend?
Absolutely. So like Jenny said, back in 2009 when Taproot and CECP were working together and helping to create this valuation, one of the things we were really aware of together is the fact that outside of professional services firms, with the more kind of traditionally established companies that don't operate with an hourly billing rate, it can be very difficult to more immediately gauge what you'd think of as that hourly valuation equivalent. So that's where we work together to set up what you'll see here as the moderate, and then in a few moments, the minimal pro bono tracking recommendations. In the moderate context, this is where there's a very helpful table provided that CECP has, as well as Taproot, to show what the very conservative, defensible external rates at an hourly level might be across different specific levels within any given role. You see here, you talk about people early level, mid-level, executive level, just to use some generic terminology. You can use this if on any given pro bono project, you do have a very specific sense of the exact composition of the team, the type of project, whether it's accounting or financial analysis or HR, and then who composes the team. And then simply by collecting the number of hours that each participated, that's where you can then use these rates in order to calculate that much more specifically accurate rate, or even use an average across any of these different levels. That can be a very helpful way if you have some information without already having an established internal hourly rate, to be able to think about it in this particular context. For those of you that don't, Jenny will take you through the minimal pro bono tracking option in case you don't have that specific sense of who's on each team, but rather just a total collective number of hours.
Yes, will do. And, you know, I should also note that the Taproot team has actually spent quite a bit of time putting together this grid and using an external source to look at the list of the most commonly offered types of pro bono services. And so those are the 8 that you see here on the left side of that grid. And I know that I should congratulate the Taproot Foundation for launching this back in October as part of your Pro Bono Week in October. So this has been a really great and highly utilized grid that we hope to continue encouraging companies to use.
And we actually have a question from the audience on that. So the person asks that we've got a system for our employees to put in their hours, but we don't have a way to know what level they are. So how should we use that chart?
That's the perfect segue question.
I know, we're thinking the same thing. Well, thank you for that excellent question, because we fortunately have this third method for tracking pro bono for companies who may not have the ability to track by career level and the type of professional service. And the great news is that what we're saying is the weighted average across all of the different and the top most commonly offered professional services is actually $150 per hour for a pro bono service project. So this $150 valuation actually defines the average per hour value of time donated by business professionals to organizations just on an aggregate national level, and it is, again, based on that average billing rate across the 8 most commonly offered areas. And the part of the good news that both TCP and Taproot announced a couple months ago is that this $150 rate is an increase of 25% from the last time that we provided this valuation guidance to the public. So I hope this answers your question to that audience member and that this is really happy news. So as a summary of the 3 scenarios for how you can track pro bono is, again, for those with the robust tracking methods using fair market value. For those with moderate tracking capabilities, using the monetary valuation guidance broken down by career level and the type of professional service. And then the third, using the estimate using the estimate of $150 per hour. So now, having said that, we are entering our second poll question. And looks like I am not able to do that right now.
While you're doing that, actually, maybe Lindsay, you can. Oh, here we go. Okay. We have a question from the audience, which is is the $150, is that U.S. or Canadian? So we've got a mix of headquarters companies on the call today. Lindsay, do you want to take that one while you're on the poll?
Sure. That data was gathered in part through some of the public data that Robert Half uses, that recruiting firm uses, and so it is using U.S.-focused data. However, what we often recommend is to be able to apply the same logic that companies often do when they are looking at the traditional volunteers an hour that's provided by independent sector, which also has an hourly rate for the more traditional hands-on service. So if you already have a country equivalent to the rate you use there, you can often use the same proportionate difference in calculating the average pro bono dollar valuation. But the $150 is US dollars.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay, for that. And Lindsay, I'm not sure if you're able to see, but I was able to get the second poll launched on the screen, and it looks like results are coming in. So the question here is asking, how does your company track, or for those who are not yet doing but are feeling quite motivated with this webinar on how they intend to track pro bono service. So we've got 5 answer choices. A, we will or maybe already using fair market value. B, we will or already using the rates by the career level and the type of service offered. C is using the estimate of $150 per hour. D might be just, maybe perhaps those who are joining today haven't yet decided what type of method to use. And then E, companies who are saying we do not have the capability to track pro bono service at the time. So we will go ahead and close the poll and then share the results here. And Lindsay, are you able to see the results on your screen?
I am, yes. Would you like me to take us through?
Yes, please.
Great. So we actually have answers that are surprisingly close to each other, which I think shows in a very clear way what the real mix is between what companies are currently able to use or planning on using. Where 24% of respondents said that you currently or will use the fair market value, 18% reported using the rates by career level, that type of service, so that moderate approach that I mentioned. 24%, so going back to that same as the first answer, around the estimate of 150 as the average, and the same amount, 24%, in undecided or not sure. And that does leave 12% that are not necessarily tracking pro bono or potentially not yet doing pro bono. So for those of you that are or are tracking, it does seem like a pretty even mix relatively speaking, or still in that unsure category and trying to decide how to track. So hopefully today can give you a few additional insights as to what approach might make the most sense for you or be the most accessible for you.
Yeah, and I hope the same too, and I hope that this next slide here will help encourage more companies to change that poll response, because this is where we talk about why this is so important. What is it about pro bono service, especially when it comes to measuring it? And the great news is that it helps companies increase their total contributions and total giving value. So the annual Giving in Numbers survey collects data on a company's total contributions, as I mentioned in section 2, in question 2A, where we ask for total giving. And the total contributions is a sum of 3 different types of giving. First is direct cash giving, foundation cash giving, and this non-cash. What is non-cash? It is comprised of pro bono service, product donations, and other. And so as you can see, if the pro bono service is and can be measured, it rolls up to your non-cash giving amount, which in turn rolls up to your company's total contribution. And why is this important? Another finding from our Giving in Numbers report that show that with looking across all of the different companies who are showing us their type of total giving breakdown, you'll notice up on top, across all companies, a typical company's portfolio has 17% of their total giving allocated to non-cash giving. And so we feel and we hope that companies feel more empowered about using this knowledge of how pro bono service is of value to their company, but also that it can be tracked and that there are 3 different methods of tracking it, and therefore can utilize that when thinking about measurement and total giving. So Lindsay, can you tell us a little bit more about pro bono service from the perspective of the Taproot Foundation and your leadership and expertise in it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know for the range of companies on the phone, some of you have had the chance, of course, to have exposure to pro bono programs within your own company, and others, it sounds like, are curious to understand what it might be able to look like for you. So I wanted to give us a little introduction to a picture of what pro bono looks like and what a program could look like for you. There are many different models. Pro bono does not just look one way. These are just a small sampling of the total number. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of what that can look like. So just to call out a few here, one of the examples you see here in the top middle is called the marathon model. That's what we've named a deep dive, one-day pro bono project approach, where you can have teams of employees that are dedicating one full day to do a deep dive, really narrowly scoped project for a nonprofit organization. For those of you interested in being able to learn more and see examples from peer companies, we just posted an article on our website or in our newsletter for those of you who receive it, an article in the San Francisco Chronicle on a pro bono marathon that we did with Kaiser Permanente out in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can see what it looks like to do projects in that particular way. Another are the standardized team projects, and an example from a thought leadership piece we put out with CECP this past year showcases the American Express Serve Together consulting program, where you can learn more about what team-based projects can look like when you have teams of employees helping nonprofits in 2 to 3 month projects, being able to deliver specific deliverables and recommendations for organizations. And you see here a number of other approaches: loaned employees with embedding an employee in an organization, or functional coaching and mentoring, where you're helping set up the opportunity for individual experts to pair one-on-one with their peer within a nonprofit organization. And to give you a sense, especially for those of you that are now thinking about tracking and valuation of what this can look like, I'm using a more bite-sized example, so the pro bono projects that are actually available for employees at any point to sign up for online through taprootplus.org. These are only 4 to 6 week projects that generally use 1 to 2 volunteers. But using the average valuation, that comes to around $6,700 of pro bono service. Just to give you a taste of some of the projects that fall in that valuation category, they've included developing a communication strategy for an organization, helping an organization with the difficult but important migration from Excel spreadsheets to QuickBooks, helping to invest in an organization's brand messaging, and improving the pitch development that they might use in fundraising, and many more. If you're looking for a few bite-sized examples of this type of pro bono service, feel free to check out taprootplus.org, and you can get a sense of what some of those project types can look like as well. But as you can see, a pretty wide variation in the models through which you can engage employees, and also in the types of skills and therefore nonprofit needs that you can address by building or leveraging this type of program. And then one of the last things I want to make sure I leave you with are some of the key questions to think about if you are considering building or maybe growing your own pro bono program. One of the things that I know the CECP data has been so helpful in showing in the past is that there is tremendous interest from within companies in building programs like this, often stemming from interest from employees. And on the nonprofit side, we know, as I mentioned before, that 92% of organizations say they need more pro bono service. So the real missing piece in bringing these two together is just being thoughtful about your program design and infrastructure. So these are the 4 questions that I often recommend a company thinks about when you're exploring what it might mean to build or even just to grow or expand an existing program you have. So thinking about the exact type of impact you're looking to have and on which types of organizations. Thinking about the type of employee expertise you're going to tap. So as specific either as which department you think you might want to look into, or which particular types of skill you think will be able to translate best to meet the needs of organizations you want to serve. And how big is this program meant to be? Do you have particular targets you need to hit around how many employees are engaged, around their availability for which model you choose, and how long you're able to leverage them, whether it's only one day or whether it can be up to a 3-month project? And then for some of you, maybe most importantly, what is your bandwidth to actually run a program? How can you ensure you can be thoughtful about the design of a program so it can actually be sustained and scaled? So these are questions I encourage you to think about. And for more insights and answers to how different programs can come to life based on your answers, you can check out some of the resources in the Do Pro Bono section of the Taproot Foundation website.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. It's so good to hear about the possibilities for the breadth and depth, as well as the scale of what a pro bono service could look like, and utilizing many different models and knowing that there are many different needs that can be met. So for those who are joining here, and I know that there may be some additional questions, just some overall high-level recap is that pro bono service, and we hope you can agree, is really a benefit to you, to your community, to your employees. I've listed here a link to a 2-pager description of what pro bono is, as well as the valuation guide of the grid. It is also included and uploaded into this webinar. So you can see on the right-hand side, there is a handout that has been uploaded. And then also, as you've heard from Lindsay, that Taproot is one of many resources to help guide your company, and so we have resources to help you with that. Another key takeaway is that companies and your team can utilize pro bono service, tracking, measuring it, and help to increase your non-cash giving. So really the first step begins with reporting it to CECP. There is that question in 2A, as well as the 3 sub-questions in section 4. And just a reminder that the 2016 survey stays open until Thursday, March 31st. Although every company should have been notified of their survey deadline. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And for those who have not yet connected, I would be happy to tell you more about the benefits of joining. And really, it's easy to get started by going and clicking on this particular link. And so with that, we've got about 5 minutes left over for Lindsay and I to answer your questions.
And we do have one that's come in, but everyone please feel free to send in more via the question panel or the chat panel. So the one that we've got was looking for a little bit more detail on the differentiation between skills-based and pro bono. And connected to that, whether non-consulting firms do both skills-based volunteering as well as pro bono. So maybe some examples of that. Or
yeah, maybe I'll just jump in with a second. Or maybe
I've
also
asked to repeat that second half of the question.
Do non-consulting firms do both skills volunteering and pro bono?
Yeah, so I'll
Lindsay,
try a quick answer from the. Yeah, I'll give the answer from the Taproot perspective, and then love to hear if there might be additional food for thought from the CECP perspective. The answer is yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we've really set out to try to do over the last 10, 15 years or so, is really help make it more clear how companies that aren't professional services firms can leverage their employee skills in this way. Because the answer is most certainly yes. You can in an official capacity, meaning having it meet the criteria that Ginny mentioned, and then even just from the logistical standpoint, while professional services firms are set up in ways that are very obviously tailored towards external consulting, there are a number of approaches that a company that's not a professional services or consulting firm can take. So the main example I would say is that we always emphasize a focus on the scope of work. So by intentionally leveraging the employees within your company to use the same expertise that you rely on them to use perhaps for internal projects every day, they can absolutely then be set up to provide that same type of support and expertise in tackling a specific scope of work for an external party, in this case, a nonprofit organization. So the answer is definitely yes, and it just takes some thoughtful design in order to make sure you're setting your employees up for success and being able to use their same skill set, but in a more kind of traditional consultative manner.
So here's an example that would be skills-based volunteering, and a similar example that would be pro bono service. So for skills-based, if a corporate accountant provides free tax services to maybe his or her community as part of their own volunteerism efforts, that would be considered a skills-based function because there are skills required to understand tax laws and to be an accountant itself. Now, if this corporate accountant had provided tax services to a specific organization or community that was endorsed, sponsored, organized by his or her company, then that's where it would be counted as pro bono service. Because as a reminder, the Giving in Numbers survey is asking for the employee's engagement under the endorsement or the guidance or the organization led by his or her employer. So we're really looking at the corporation's involvement and leadership with this. So certainly the individual accountant's time and skill that is being offered should be celebrated as volunteerism, but specifically as we think of our pro bono service under the context of corporate contributions and corporate activities, that would not be considered pro bono service. I hope that answers your question. And Lindsay, I know that sometimes with Taproot Foundation, because your audience is much wider and you also do work with individuals, that would still be considered a pro bono service program for your team. That is correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And I think where companies can really invest in that distinction and in making sure that it also meets the CECP criteria and filling out the survey is exactly as Jenny was saying, really having that official investment on the company's behalf in creating the program or the structure through which the employees are officially and formally, providing that professional expertise to an organization.
Great. Well, with that, it looks like our time is up for our webinar. I wanted to thank my co-presenter, Lindsay, for her time, her expertise, and for her voice in encouraging pro bono service as an important way for companies to get involved. So with that, thank you so much, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful day, and the recording will be available as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.